The smell of fresh coffee and freshly printed paper wafted through the air of the luxurious law firm Kensington and Meyer, one of the most respected in Chicago, Michael Carter. He entered the black marble hall, feeling the stares of the receptionists, next to the glass entrance. The suit he wore wasn't designer, his leather briefcase had signs of use, and he didn't carry that air of superiority typical of lawyers there. But he wasn't there as a lawyer. The building gleamed with modern minimalist decor, but Michael didn't mind that. He cared about as people were treated there. He had built his reputation on one basic principle: justice must serve everyone, not just those who appear to have power. But he knew that not everyone thought that way, and he was there to test that. He went to the reception and waited to be served. The receptionist, a blonde woman with a tight bun and thin glasses, gave him a brief look before typing again on the computer. "Can I help?" she said without taking her eyes off the screen. "I have a meeting." She sighed impatiently. "The public defender's office is in the other building, sir. Here we only serve private clients." Michael raised an eyebrow. "I know exactly where I am. I have a meeting with the senior partner." She finally looked at him, clearly doubtful. "Name?" "Michael Carter." She started typing, but her expression changed to confusion before turning to skepticism. "There is no Michael Carter on the list. Are you sure you are in the right place?" Michael sighed, already expecting this. "Why don't you call someone higher up to confirm?" She smiled sideways, a smile filled with disbelief. "Members do not have time for consultations without an appointment. If you want, I can give you the contact details of a junior lawyer so he can evaluate your case." Michael looked around. Some lawyers hurried past, completely ignoring his presence. Others greeted suited customers with firm handshakes and fake smiles. The contrast was stark. Before he could respond, a tall man in a gray suit came towards him. The name on the badge said Thomas Holloway, Human Resources Director. He stood next to the receptionist, watching Michael with a calculating gaze. "Is everything okay here?" Holloway asked, his voice full of cool professionalism. The receptionist crossed her arms. "He says he has a meeting with one of the partners, but he's not on the list. I think he got the office mixed up." Michael kept his gaze steady. "I'm not confused." Holloway let out a short laugh. "I understand. But our firm only works with a very specific profile of clients. Maybe it's better to look for another place that can serve you within your means." Michael took a deep breath. He already expected something like this to happen, and I already knew exactly what to do next. He took his cell phone from his pocket and dialed a number. The phone rang twice before anyone answered. "I'm here at reception. Come now." Michael hung up and put the phone in his pocket. The receptionist and Holloway exchanged glances. They didn't know what was coming, but they were about to find out. The silence at the reception was almost palpable. The receptionist and Holloway exchanged quick glances, still convinced that Michael was nothing more than someone lost or inconvenient. "Who exactly did you call?" asked Holloway, trying to hide his discomfort. Michael just smiled lightly, without responding. Seconds later, the rhythmic sound of leather shoes echoed through the hall. A man with an imposing posture, well-trimmed gray hair, and an impeccable suit walked through the reception with determined steps. Richard Kensington, the founding partner of the firm, was not a man who usually went down to reception to meet anyone. But he was there now, and his expression when he saw Michael left no doubt. "Michael, good to see you, my friend," Kensington said, extending his hand with a genuine smile. The receptionist froze. Holloway lost some of the color in his face. Michael shook his partner's hand calmly. "Richard, thanks for coming. It seems there was a misunderstanding here." Kensington frowned, his gaze shifting from the receptionist to Holloway. "Misunderstanding?" Before Michael could respond, Holloway cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. "Ah, Mr. Kensington, we didn't know he was up." An acquaintance of yours. Michael crossed his arms. Funny, you didn't even try to find out who I was before you decided I didn't belong here. The receptionist looked down, shaking her hands. Kensington sighed and put his hands in his pockets, his tone becoming more serious. Michael, can we talk privately? Michael nodded, but not before casting one last glance at Holloway. Let's go. But I think it would be interesting for some people here to hear what we have to say. Michael followed Kensington down a long hallway to a glass-enclosed conference room with a spectacular view of Chicago's skyscrapers. So, you came to test my team, Kensington said, pouring himself a coffee. In fact, I came to test your culture. The partner smiled but didn't seem satisfied. And what did you think? Michael leaned back in his chair. I thought your reception decides who is important based on appearance, and that an HR director is so sure of his own judgment that he doesn't even consider the possibility of being wrong. Kensington rested his elbows on the table, interlacing his fingers. You have always been methodical. But why this test now? Michael looked him in the eyes. Because I'm considering investing here. But I don't put money in a place where I myself would be ignored if I wasn't wearing the right uniform. Kensington was silent. Michael stood up. And if this happens to me, a renowned lawyer, imagine the clients who don't have my last name or my connections. The conversation was interrupted by Kensington's phone ringing. He answered, listened for a few seconds, and then frowned. Holloway? Yes, he is here. I understood. He hung up and took a deep breath before looking at Michael. It looks like your little test created a problem. Michael smiled. I think it depends on perspective. The conference room door opened with a hurried push. Thomas Holloway. He entered, visibly uncomfortable, followed by the receptionist, who avoided looking at anyone. Mr. Kensington, I can explain, Holloway began, but the coldness in the founding partner's eyes made him hesitate. Kensington stood up slowly, crossing his arms. He can? So explain it to me, Holloway. How exactly was a renowned lawyer and potential investor treated like an intruder in our own office? Holloway adjusted his tie, his forehead beginning to glisten with sweat. It was an error of perception. Mr. Carter wasn't on the meeting list and, well, we need to maintain a certain standard at reception. Michael smirked. A standard based on what? Designer suit? Expensive watch? Skin color? The receptionist lowered her head even more. Holloway stuttered. That's not what I meant. Kensington raised his hand, silencing him. Be honest, Thomas. If Michael had arrived here wearing an Armani and driving a Bentley, would you have doubted him? Holloway did not respond. The silence was enough. Michael leaned against the table, watching the man who minutes before had treated him like a nobody. You know what's most interesting? I didn't come here just to invest. Holloway blinked, confused. What? Michael smiled slightly before continuing. Richard and I were talking about my possible joining the firm as a partner. The air in the room seemed to change instantly. Holloway went pale. The receptionist's eyes widened. Kensington confirmed with a nod. Michael was considering a merger between his office and ours, a partnership that could expand our clientele and further elevate our reputation. Holloway looked like he was about to faint. Michael continued. But now that I've seen how people here really treat people they deem as not belonging, I'm reconsidering. After all, what kind of environment would this be for my clients? The receptionist bit her lip, visibly regretful. Holloway tried to regain his composure. Michael, I understand this was a mistake, but we can solve this. I guarantee it was nothing personal. Michael let out a short laugh. That's exactly the problem, Thomas. This wasn't personal to you, but it should be. Silence fell again over the room. Kensington sighed and turned to Holloway. "Thomas, we need to discuss the future of your position here." The impact of those words sent Holloway reeling. Michael grabbed his briefcase, ready to leave. "Richard, I like your vision for this office, but if something doesn't change, my investment will go elsewhere." Kensington nodded seriously. "The changes start today." Michael looked at Holloway one last time before leaving the room. He didn't need an apology. The actions would speak for themselves. Michael left the conference room feeling the weight of tension in the air. In the hallway, the employees were looking at him differently now, some curious, others embarrassed. He didn't need to say anything. The truth had already been exposed. When he passed reception, the same woman who had previously ignored him was now standing stiffly, as if trying to disappear behind the counter. Michael stopped for a moment and looked at her. "How many customers have you treated the same way? You treated me today?" She opened her mouth to respond, but couldn't. He just nodded, letting the silence do its work, before heading toward the elevator. Richard Kensington accompanied him there. "Michael, I know it was a mistake, but I want to make it right. You know I'm not like Holloway." Michael looked at his office partner. Kensington indeed seemed sincere, but intentions without action meant nothing. "The issue isn't you, Richard. It's the culture that you allowed to grow here. This was not an isolated error. It was a pattern." Kensington sighed and nodded. "What do you suggest?" Michael crossed his arms. "Start with an HR restructuring. If Holloway was comfortable enough to act like this, it means that mentality is already ingrained in the office. You need to bring in someone who values customers and employees for who they are, not what they look like." Kensington seemed to reflect. "And you? Will you continue considering the partnership?" Michael glanced at the elevator panel, the numbers decreasing as they approached the ground floor. "I haven't decided yet, but I will follow the changes. If you prove you're committed, who knows?" Kensington smiled slightly. "Fair." The elevator doors opened and Michael left without looking back. Outside, the cold Chicago wind greeted him. He took out his cell phone and sent a quick message to his assistant. "Set up meetings with other firms this week. I want to explore all options. If Kensington and Meyer wanted your investment, I would have to show that I deserved it." 3 weeks have passed since the incident at the Kensington and Meyer. Michael kept his distance, focusing on meetings with other firms that showed interest in a merger. Meanwhile, he discreetly followed the changes that Richard Kensington had promised to implement. That morning, he received an unexpected email from Kensington. "Michael, we'd like you to come into the office tomorrow to see the changes we've implemented. I know you still have questions, but I want you to see for yourself." Michael hesitated for a moment before responding. "I'll be there at 10 a.m. The next morning, he walked through the office's glass doors again, but this time something was different. The receptionist, the same one who had treated him with indifference before, stood up immediately upon seeing him and offered a genuine smile. "Good morning, Mr. Carter. Mr. Kensington is waiting for you in the meeting room. Can I offer a coffee?" Michael raised an eyebrow, surprised by the change. "Accepted." He took the coffee and walked down the corridor, observing details that he hadn't noticed before. The walls displayed new company guidelines, emphasizing inclusion and equity in service. In the staff, a new name occupied the position of Human Resources Director. Holloway was no longer there. Kensington greeted him with a firm handshake. "We made some changes, and we don't stop here." He explained that they started to review service from reception to meetings with clients. Each employee underwent training on discrimination and equal service. And above all, internal culture was revamped to ensure no one else went through what Michael went through. "And now, still think this office doesn't deserve your investment?" Kensington asked, a slight smile on his lips. Michael sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "I want to see how these changes are sustained over time, but I'm reconsidering." Kensington smiled. That's all I could ask for. Michael knew that this transformation didn't erase what happened, but it was a start. And beginnings meant possibilities. Michael left the meeting room feeling a difference in the air. Before, that office exuded exclusivity and arrogance. Now, it seemed like a place where people really mattered. When he passed the reception, the same woman who had previously ignored him now stood up again. "Have a great day, Mr. Carter." Michael stopped and looked at her. His tone was different. Not forced, but genuine. "Thanks. You too." In the elevator, he took out his cell phone and sent a message to his assistant. "Set up a second meeting with Kensington for next week. I want to review the merger contracts." He hadn't made a final decision yet, but now I was inclined to give it a chance. Outside, the Chicago wind was blowing hard, but Michael felt a different lightness. He knew that changing a company's culture didn't happen overnight, but what he saw today showed that change was possible. The real lesson from that experience wasn't just about business, it was about respect. 6 months later, Michael walked through the office again. Kensington and Carter LLP, now with your name on the door. The merger was made official after he was sure that the change in the company's culture was real. In the following months, he made a point of closely monitoring the new processes, ensuring that no one was judged by appearance or social status. At reception, the new attendant, a young woman named Lisa, he smiled when he entered. "Good morning, Mr. Carter. You have a meeting with the team of new lawyers in 15 minutes. Do you need something first?" Michael smiled. "Just a coffee, Lisa. Thanks." As he waited, he saw a young lawyer entering. His simple clothes and anxious expression indicated that he was a newcomer, perhaps on his first interview. Before he could say anything, Lisa smiled at the boy. "Welcome to Kensington and Carter. You can sit down and someone will come and serve you soon. Want a coffee while you wait?" The young man seemed surprised by the kindness. Michael watched the scene with satisfaction. This was exactly how he wanted people to be treated there. When he picked up his coffee and headed to the meeting room, he felt a deep certainty. He didn't just invest in an office, he helped build a legacy. And this legacy would not be defined by money, but by the way people were valued.